Thanks for joining us here today. Excited to have a great topic and a great set of panelists. We actually did a similar one of these live at Cardflight Conference 2020 in February, back when live events were a thing, and got very good feedback on it. And so wanted to take advantage of the fact that we have a lot more people engaging in these kind of virtual sessions, and pulling this group together to have them share their perspectives on where the industry is and where it's headed. So very excited. I think what each of the four of us have in common is, each of our businesses are creating enabling technologies for small businesses, and that we use the merchant acquire and ISO channels to reach those businesses. That said, of course, the technologies are changing, market dynamics are changing, competitive pressures are accelerating, and today we're here to discuss those topics and a whole lot more. So without further ado, let's do a quick round of intros of the panelists, and maybe I'll start with you, Mark. If you could introduce yourself, your company, and your role before we dive in.
Great. This is Mark Bunny. I'm with Ingenico. Ingenico's a leading payment solution provider globally. My role and job in North America is I lead our go-to-market strategy. So that entails looking out 3+ years into the market and trying to look at the crystal ball to see what's going to happen, where the market goes, where merchants are going, as where consumers are going. Along with that, focus on our vertical market segmentation. So we look at a lot of things through a vertical lens. So it could be in retail, it could be in hospitality, healthcare, or even some unattended use cases. So that's primarily what I do for my daily job today.
Thanks, Mark, and welcome. Heather.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, I had to get myself off mute there. My name is Heather Malachnik. I am with PAX Technologies. I am the Senior Vice President of ISO and Acquiring. So our ISO and Acquiring relationships, I have a team of folks in the sales and support from account management, as well as technical support, that work with all of those accounts, named accounts, and even some of our smaller accounts to drive PAX sales throughout those channels in basically all the verticals. We hit on lots of different verticals in our market as our guys are dealing with, the feet on the street. So that's about it.
Excellent. Thanks, Heather. Welcome. And Tony from Verifone.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for joining, everyone. Thanks for the include on this. I had a great time at the Cardflight conference on this panel this year. So really looking forward to this web-based instance. I will say real quick, though, the accommodations were much better at the Cardflight conference. The maid hasn't shown up to my house in weeks. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so I'm with Verifone. I'm in our product management org. I focus predominantly on North America, so US, Canada, and I have roadmap responsibility for the payment applications that are used therein, as well as some of our hosted solutions. And then we have a lot of, things that are regionally focused. Those are basically where I spend a lot of my time. Then we have some global offerings. And so basically what I do with those is sort of feed in the regional needs and requirements into those global offerings.
Excellent. Thanks, Tony.
Sure.
So the first question really goes out to all three of you, but maybe I'll tee it off to Tony to give the first crack at the answer. So I think each of your companies sell a lot of traditional standalone countertop payment terminals. I'd love to start there. So how long do you see those product lines making up a material share of your sales? And then, what will be the forcing functions that cause that to shift away?
Yeah. So definitely for the foreseeable future, right? In North America specifically, we have a pretty good mix of those standalone countertop terminals, along with more of the sort of multi-lane and vertical focused devices and applications. Throughout the world, it's a little bit different. We do a lot of DTM, direct to merchant style business in some of the Europe areas, as well as Australia, New Zealand, things like that. But in North America, I think it's probably going to remain about the same. We might see some erosion in the countertop space, but that's mainly not really a change in the mix. It's more or less we'll see more kind of Android-based smart terminals in that area versus just the traditional, you know, proprietary OS style terminals.
Perfect, and thanks, Tony. And just so everyone is aware, we only have an audio feed for Tony, so we do Mark and Heather and me on video. But so there's nothing wrong with your Zoom if you're noticing that. But obviously, you know, excited to have him here and welcome him. Heather, you want to field the same question? I mean, you know, you guys obviously have a lot of Android stuff, but you know, specific to the standalone countertop kind of traditional terminals, where's that market headed, and what's gonna, you know, put it out of its misery? Not that I have a opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Tony. I don't think it's going to go away anytime in the foreseeable future, as much as people want to think traditional terminals and countertop terminals are going away. You know, it took the US, 25 years to adopt debit. So we are not slow moving. You know, we do not move quickly on anything that we do. Merchants in our space like what they're doing. They like you know, what they understand. We're trying to shift obviously to the Android. Android allows us to do a lot more things with the terminal, a lot easier. I shouldn't say a lot more things, but it allows it to do it a lot easier. Merchants understand Android. A lot of them have Android phones. So the leap is not as great for them to do things other than payment with those devices. But I still think that even in that space, while we may expand out and add ancillary services, you know, like your card flight applications, we're not getting away from a traditional terminal. The terminal, whether it's an Android or, you know, our non-Android devices, are still, you know, front and center and still what the bulk of, you know, people are asking for today.
And Mark, is it a similar story on the Ingenico end?
It is. I was thinking about this because if I answered something completely different than the others, it's like maybe it's like, are we looking at this differently? Let me answer it maybe in a different way than Janet and Tony. If you look at the U.S. market is heavily POS centric. So a lot of the systems today, payment is tied to a POS. It could be a separate device, but it's very much tied together. Versus globally, standalone solutions are much more the norm. You go into Brazil as an example, they're not tying into a business system or application. But US is actually leading in that way. I mean, over the last few years, we've seen, I'll call it certain subcategories within the market where going to Android or going to a solution that's larger screen can really run a business app has definitely taken hold, but it hasn't happened broadly across the market. I love Janet's example of 25 years to debit. Look at EMB. We're 5 years in right now, and we're still not fully integrated in the market from an EMB perspective. So it takes a while for things to change within the marketplace. I still think a lot of merchants, a standalone solution, it's what they need. It runs their business. So we're going to continue to see a lot of customers saying, "Hey, that's what I'll go with and work it from there." So the only thing that could change that is if there is a new catalyst or value prop that says, you know what, I need to have something that's really tied into my business solutions. Then I will migrate there. But I think it's going to be more gradual within the marketplace, and it's not going to be a complete transition overnight.
So I think that's actually a good launching point in terms of, you know, what the catalyst is. I mean, as you think of the next generation of products, what for small business, you know, merchant need, what is the key kind of things you're looking to solve for there? Like what are the customer needs that, you know, as your current next generation products that you have in mind that you guys are solving for? For you, Mark. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, it's for me. Okay. Sorry. I didn't know who that was for. So, I mean, I think a couple of things that is driving kind of our future development is really around you think about it from an SMB merchant perspective, they want to do a lot of the same things that a larger retailer or merchant in general would want to do. maybe they went down to their local Walmart or Best Buy, and they saw either in lane or some type of mobile solution, say, hey, that's what I want to be able to manage their business. So I think it's still how can we democratize technology to make it easy for an SMB customer to implement and deploy. While a larger merchant's going to want something that's highly customized, lots of flexibility, an SMB customer may not have the resources to manage that. So it has to be really out of the box and easy to implement. So when we're looking at ways from either a software or even a cloud services perspective to make it easier for a customer or merchant to actually be able to implement new technologies. I think along with that, I mean, it's things that are generally important across the market. I mean, COVID is changing some of the dynamics in what people are thinking about what's really important from a solution set perspective, whether it's a changing it where they want more of a less touch experience, i.e. they don't want to touch the terminal, they want to go contactless or Apple Pay, Google Pay, whatever it may be, even to using different types of plastics or solutions. I mean, we launched last year some antimicrobial based solutions that would be for the healthcare retail market, which was designed to really, again, hospital systems, doctors' offices are very much about protecting the merchant or protecting the consumer experience. So those are things that are probably going to come into play. They're going to be more important now than before because of some of the recent changes in the market.
Got it. And I think you kind of opened the topic of COVID there. I'll maybe toss this one to Heather first, although, you know, each of you guys have global organizations, so have probably seen pretty widespread impact of this pandemic. I mean, Heather, what observations do you have of you know, how COVID's affected PAX's business, your customers? Are there opportunities coming out of this that you see?
Yeah, obviously it's affected everybody. Sales are down overall through our distribution channels. Thankfully, they are starting to track up. We are seeing, you know, people going back to work. The country, you know, the states are starting to reopen and people are getting back to work. Interestingly, during this time, we saw a lot of our groups use this time for education. Our weekly calls that we do on a regular basis for training on PAX Store and all our terminal management systems were flooded with people coming into them. So people were educating themselves. Our developer portal was overrun with people, you know, trying to catch up on development or do development that they've kind of put on the back burner waiting for some time. So our development part, you know, really we were probably busier than we've ever been. I joke with people that I don't understand how people got so many projects done around their houses working at home, because I was in my office from 6 to 6 every day and didn't have time to eat lunch. So we were definitely, you know, internally still really, really busy, but it has, you know, opened up the, you know, customers coming to us and saying, you know, how can we implement, you know, no touch solutions, or how do we, you know, how do we add a pin pad to everything now, because we don't want to touch that, you know, cool device that you have that was going to be handed over to somebody. We don't want to touch it anymore. So we're seeing a lot of people thinking outside the box now as to what does this new world look like, as merchants everywhere are putting up glass, you know, and separating themselves from the consumer. So we're seeing a lot of that, and, you know, trying to come back with, you know, longer pin pad cables for something as simplistic as attaching a pin pad to a device. And what does that look like in those implementations? So yeah, it's definitely, I do see we're tracking back up. Our help desk is back at capacity again. We're taking the same number of calls that we were prior to the pandemic. So people are starting to come back to work. And, you know, we're a lot of groups that we saw use this time to figure out what their strategy was going to be coming out of this, to help merchants recover quickly, you know, with new programs and funding programs and things that they were doing for the merchants.
Excellent. That certainly tracks. We've actually been publishing on a weekly basis the transaction data that we see across our base with a small business impact report, and we've definitely seen that over the past, I think it's, you know, 5-6 weeks in a row now of sales gains each week, and we're getting pretty close to the levels we were at in early March, which is good. I mean, still a handful of business types that are still shut down entirely, and obviously some regional differences, but we've definitely, it's been a positive, few weeks in terms of gains
Yes.
on our end. So, Tony, what do you guys see on the Verifone end, and either opportunities or key challenges you guys are navigating?
Yeah, so some of the early key challenges we were having is, there wasn't really good education, I guess, in the merchant space about, hey, how do you actually properly clean one of these devices that hundreds of people are touching a day, right? So we had a lot of, repair scenarios where we needed to, swap devices for merchants and put together a really good campaign of, hey, here's the proper way to clean it, don't dump a bottle of hand sanitizer on the thing, that sort of stuff. And that's somewhat normalized now. And we've got a lot of merchant partners who are starting to reopen their stores now, right? So we're starting to see the little increase in transactions on our hosted services, and then also to help desk for the, just general inquiries and things like that. So that's a nice positive sign. On the just kind of general features and those sorts of things, we're seeing a lot of interest, right, from merchants who either haven't previously done contactless or perhaps do contactless but want to start layering in like Apple Pay, Google Pay, that kind of stuff. So that's seen a huge increase in those number of requests. One of the other things that kind of dovetails into that, right, the whole touchless scenario is the alternative payment methods that are starting to emerge. So things like, PayPal, Venmo, those sorts of things. We're seeing a lot of interest in pursuing some of those, non-card, non-PIN based payment methods as well.
Got it. I assume, on alternate payment methods that with travel way down, you're getting less demand for WeChat Pay and Alipay.
Exactly. Yeah. Those were always the really tangible examples, right, of those alternative payment methods. And yeah, there's not been as wide or as deep use of those as there were pre-COVID.
Got it. Thanks, Tony. Mark, anything you want to add as it pertains to this pandemic or kind of what Ingenico's seeing or doing?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll say one internal and then one kind of external. So it's very interesting the amount of work going on right now. It hasn't slowed down. And if anything, because of COVID, it's opening up new opportunities where people are looking at solution sets that are defined more accurately to social distancing. I mean, you get into drive-through solutions are changing right now from a quick service or pharmacy perspective. But it's you compare it to like when there was a financial downturn back in 2000, 2001, or even 2008, 2009. It feels very, very different. And I think that's a positive because that I believe the market will come out of this more quickly. And that's a positive for all of us because I mean, this impacts everyone. Whether it's SMB all the way up to a large merchant. So I think that's something it's interesting insight from an external perspective. I mean, our business in Q1 really didn't change. I mean, I think there wasn't really an impact at that point in time. Now, Q2 definitely seeing more of the slowdown because in April, many parts of the U.S. or Mexico or Canada or other parts of the world that were shut down. So definitely things slowed, but a lot of customers continued with projects, which I think is a positive. Now, where they really didn't and things really I think materially slowed was probably in the hospitality. So whether it's hotel, travel, restaurants, I think are definitely much more impacted than say general retail. But I think it's slowed, but things are definitely seeing signs of picking up from a business perspective, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, I think in restaurant, we've been amazed at just the amount of anecdotes of people that have pivoted their business on a fly and did curbside, takeout, delivery. I mean, it was a lot of restaurant owners shut down entirely, but it feels like at least as many found a way to pivot their business, even if it was a traditional sit down dining establishment.
Yep. And I think along with that, consumers changed too. Yep. They wanted to support those local businesses. I mean, They still may go to a larger chain restaurant, but if there's a barbecue place that's down the street, people are willing to go there to support that business owner, which is I think great also.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as things progressed, also a lot of people realized they didn't want to be making 21 meals a week at home.
No.
Gets a little after a while. So anyways, so transitioning, let's talk about the market kind of landscape as a whole. I mean, aside from your fellow panelists, I mean, who do you see as the competition out there in the market, or who are the people you're watching and paying close attention to, as you guys figure out your respective strategies? Maybe I'll start that one with Heather and go to the others.
Obviously our biggest competition is already on this panel. But I think if you look at the market in general, I tell people all the time, my biggest competition is the next PAX, the next company like me who was nobody 10 years ago and came into this market and has taken it over. Who's that next person that's going to try to vie for those top spots? And right now, I couldn't tell you who that is, but there's a lot of companies out there in the terminal space trying to be, one of the next big guys that's out there.
Got it. Tony, how about on your end? Similar?
Yeah, it's, everybody here involved in payments probably feels somewhat the same, I guess. It's such a, tangled industry. I feel like we compete with everybody we partner with also, right? It just depends on which segment of the business you're looking at. I mean, obviously hardware wise, yes, my fellow panelists, services wise, we compete with some processors and acquirers in some regards, but they're also our cooperative partners in some other places. POS systems, we've got, a really nice Petropause that we compete against NCR. Right. So we've just got competitors at every angle, and some of those are friendly in some places. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Got it. How about Mark? Similar story on the Ingenico end, or you guys view the market landscape differently?
Yeah, yes and no.
Well.
I'm sorry.
I know you guys have acquiring businesses as well, in addition.
Yeah, over in Europe. Yeah, so it's like Tony. It's there's a concept called co-competition, where some companies you're partnering with in one area, in another area you're competing with them, and definitely a kind of a key theme or trend in the payments world, just especially with all the acquisitions occurring and people really expanding their business portfolio quite a bit. So I mean, we look at really all types of companies in the payments world. I mean, again, hardware, software, cloud, some direct, some not really direct competitors. So we try to look at that, and for a couple of reasons. One is maybe they're not competing with us today, but maybe they could be in the future. So we just need to be on the watch for them. But it's also trying to understand what they're doing to see what's happening in the market, maybe what things we should be thinking about differently from an overall solution. The one area that we also spend time on, which is a different category, is I'll call it more just general technology companies. The technology companies, they have a different view, a different approach when they go after a new market. And they can definitely have a disruption factor. Not always that they'll be successful, but they definitely look at when they attack a market very differently than say a payments specific company. So we also watch for them. I mean, you've even seen where, again, you get guys, well, it's like a perfect example. It's like Facebook. Facebook announced that they're now offering e-commerce capability for small businesses on their website. Well, they historically haven't been a competitor to us, but maybe they could become one. Or maybe it's looking at Amazon and what they're thinking about with different payment technologies and how the consumer, that experience in the store could change. So we look at a lot of different things to see what's gonna become real, what's more pie in the sky.
Got it. Yeah, no, and that, I mean, certainly the Amazons and Facebooks can absolutely become, if not head-to-head competitors, but substitutes, in the eyes of that small business owner for their time and attention and payment acceptance. We'll start this one with Tony, but again, want to kind of give everyone a crack at it. As you think through your next generation of hardware, feels like there's a lot of software and services being attached to that. Where do you guys look to offer that in-house? Where are you looking to work with third-party partners? Where are you looking to leave it up to your customers? How do you think through the software and services that come with your next generation of hardware?
Yeah. So we envision, the building of a platform, right? Where the hardware is kind of like the first step into that platform. Everybody's familiar with, in-person payments. So we're trying to, build out a stack that allows those to sort of, grow into other channels as well, right? So on the device side, OS, kind of the core payment features, those are the kinds of things that we would want to retain some control over. And then outside of that, right, we're looking to third-party ISVs, VARs, et cetera, to help, build applications that suit certain markets on top of those devices. And then on the services side, gateways and encryption services and estate management and things like that. Those are some of the services that, obviously in some cases include the device, some cases might not, for instance, like in e-commerce services and things like that. So we're, open to integration and partnership on pretty much all of those aspects.
Got it. So it sounds like a partner driven, but certainly with a platform of service offerings, led by Verifone as part of it. I mean, Heather, are you guys thinking through it the same way at PAX? I mean, are you looking to go for a platform approach, or how do you think through the
Well, I think PAX has always taken the stand. I mean, PAX grew up as a development house, so most of what we do and what we've always done is, we do the payment, we keep the payment, and we allow you to talk to that payment, via our semi-integrated toolkit. So we've always taken the stance that we're going to work with the third parties to deliver whatever those additional ancillary applications are that our consumers want. Using our toolkit, using our stuff to make it, easy to do, and we'll continue to maintain the payment and the payment applications, in that core competency as far as what we do. I think as far as additional services, we look to use, our terminal management systems with PAX Store, and the additional, the remote viewers and the RKI and the things that we can do that traditionally we don't see our acquirers or ISOs either wanting to do or wanting to get out of, because maybe some of them at one point did do all their own encryption, but they've decided it's just not worth the effort. So we are really trying to figure out how do we manage to what they want without competing with them. What is it they want us to offer as a service offering that doesn't compete with what they're doing today in their core competency? And that will continue to be our message and our mantra as far as we go forward.
Yeah, and that's always tough to get perfect, but
yes, very tough.
It's a worthwhile goal, and even acknowledging
exactly the fine line.
Half the battle, I think, sometimes. What about Mark? I feel like I might be messing up with the brand name here. I mean, you guys announced something. Was it a platform as a service offering, or do you mind just giving kind of the summary of kind of how you guys think through what you're building?
Yeah, so I mean, before going to platform as a service, I think our strategy and approach, when you look at holistically around software and services, is we want to provide a lot of options for our partners and customers. But we understand that we may not be that right solution for everyone, and that's okay. So that could be, it's like, yeah, we'll provide the payment application that's running on the terminal. But in some cases, a partner, because they're focused in a particular market segment or use case, they want to develop their own application. So we're going to enable them to do that. So they don't have to take all the pieces of the solution. From a payment as a platform, this is, again, a bit more of a longer term strategy, but I think we've all seen all the challenges in the market when there's all these different services and they're from separate organizations. How do you bring them together? And that's what, as Ingenico, we're trying to think about this a little differently to make it easy to combine all these services and and then make it, from a commercial model perspective, give merchants different options on how they purchase the solution. It's not always a one-time upfront fee. Maybe it could go to a monthly type fee, whether it's kind of like as a terminal as a service, almost as a rental model. So we're really looking at different ways to not only offer different services, whether it's Ingenico or partners as a more of a comprehensive offering, but then also looking at the commercial model. So it can be very, very different. It's been interesting before COVID, there was a lot more interest paying for everything up front. Now, because people are being more sensitive with cash flows, or maybe they just don't want to do the cash outlay, they're thinking about, well, maybe I could do a kind of a monthly type model, and that would work for my business at this point in time.
Got it. So we've got two questions have come in related to touchless commerce. So we'll go ahead and field those now. And again, for any of our attendees, feel free to use the Q&A tool at the bottom to send questions in, and we'll work them in from here on out. So we talked a little bit ago about touch-free, so the non-NFC version of contactless payments, and this idea of changing the payment and checkout flow. Do any, and I'll leave this to whoever wants to jump in. I mean, do you guys have specific solutions either today that can be repurposed for that, or that you've put in development? Like, what is the hardware solution for that kind of demand or use case? And any of you that want to field that or have a thought on it, I mean, feel free.
So Derek, are you referring to more physical, touchless, less physical interaction?
Yeah, or for people trying to create physical distance, even for transactions that. So the exact question was, it was mentioned that there is more and more interest for touch-free solutions. Is there already something planned in terms of innovative hardware solutions to answer this demand? That was the exact question that came in.
Yeah, so I'll start, and maybe Heather or Tony can add. I mean, I think we're seeing it in drive-through and curbside, where it's now leveraging other just accessories. So it's not anything necessarily that we've had to develop from new, but taking polls and enabling the ability of the store associate to be distanced a little bit more from the consumer. Even the use case of pay at the table, where you may be handing over a terminal for paying. Now it's people want that distance, so using other accessories to enable that. So definitely seeing it in the mobile type of use cases, not as much in the in-lane type of experience, other than I think the payment contactless, so EMV contactless. I think definitely we're seeing a much greater level of adoption, even in the short weeks that COVID's come into play, but not so much changing the lane experience itself, other than maybe putting up glass or plexiglass type of displays in a grocery or other type of retail store.
Yeah,
similar. Heather, Tony, anything?
Yeah, similar perspective, right? Like not anything completely new in terms of enabling touchless or contactless or less touch. It's more or less just we're seeing an uptick of merchants who previously didn't take contactless now have a much larger interest in taking contactless forms of payment, either traditional EMV, contactless, or through the pays, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay as similar options. We have encountered some scenarios where even some merchants might be on older solutions that might not even support EMV contactless, and they're trying to march down the path of enabling even just MSD contactless until they can get to EMV contactless. But that's been a very small percentage.
So then is the larger percentage is that merchants that have existing hardware that can support it and they just need to update the software on it? Is that
exactly? Yeah, just perhaps either they haven't ever had it turned on or didn't previously certify it or anything like that. So.
Got it. So you're facing a newfound urgency there for tapping.
Exactly.
Does that track, Heather, with things you see on your end around?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting, I mean, all of our devices support contactless. So to Tony's point, we have people enabling it that weren't enabling it earlier. We have, I mean, a lot of really simplistic, questions about, I have a device, I now want to attach a pin pad. What's the longest cable you can give me? How far away can I get from my device that's, sitting on the counter, which in the past hasn't been necessarily a big deal. So we're seeing a lot more just, basic, how can I get this done quickly without, having to reinvent the wheel or do something different just by adding a longer cable or using existing technology that we already have today. So we're seeing a lot of questions related to that. How do we attach, how do we talk wirelessly to, a countertop device? What's that look like, in the, not only the drive-through, but pay at the table, pay at the curb, all of these implementations where they're actually bringing stuff to you, and how do you get your payment from that perspective? So we're seeing a lot more of that. And again, not necessarily reinventing anything or inventing anything, but just repurposing what we have and using it, in that manner that it hasn't been used before, or hasn't, not that it couldn't have been used that way, it's just not how they were using it.
Got it. A related question actually just came in from Denise Hofer. How's the timing of getting contactless certified with processors? She's specifically saying she's seeing where processors have put projects on hold for EMV contact only. Have you guys found that in your experiences, or?
I think most of them are already certified. I don't think you have many major, at least not in my space, there aren't many major acquirers that don't already have that certified.
Yeah. And Tony, is it similar on the Verifone end?
Yeah, same.
Yeah, contactless is, contactless, we've been doing certifications really since 2015. So,
yeah.
So it's more the norm. I think the challenge with any, when you do E&D certification, because it's usually going to be contact and contactless, is it still takes a while to get done. And that's the challenge for any of us when we want to get new solutions in the market. We got to go through that process, and I think some processors and acquirers are faster than others. So it's definitely a variable that we all have to work through, because it impacts all of us to get a solution in the market.
Yeah, true. And one thing that hasn't helped that is the whole everybody's working from home now, right? So even some of the processors and acquirers have been impacted and not capable to deploy resources to support those certifications under the ways they have been in the past. So
yeah, even just sharing assets. Physical test boxes and stuff like that.
Yeah, the toolkits that they need, and yeah,
we were actually finding it's our company was able to make the migration pretty well. We're more than half our team are software developers, and so we're pretty tech centric. So it was easier cutover for us than most remote work. But one of the specific areas we had the most challenges with initially was around distributed teams not being able to share devices. So in an office environment, you have an engineer can pre-configure a device, walk it physically over to the QA analyst or a product person and get them to validate something. But it's a lot different when everyone's working at their own homes. You can't just physically hand a device to someone that's configured a certain way for testing. This next question, I'll toss to Mark first. It's from Ben Keeney. Requiring a PIN for debit cards or a PIN pad seems to be holding the adoption of touchless back. Do you foresee new technology that doesn't require manual PIN entry?
So in the U.S. market itself, the U.S. market doesn't require a PIN. Where PIN is required is when you're wanting to use your debit card and use it and enter the PIN in itself. But you could still use a debit card as it could be contact or contactless transaction and not have to enter a PIN. So the U.S. market, I think, is in a different place than even Canada. Canada's chip and PIN. So there, if you go above the threshold of a contactless transaction, which they fortunately just raised from, I think, 100 Canadian to 250, above that 250 limit, you're gonna have to enter your PIN in. So, that's been a challenge more outside the US. In the US, it's like you can leverage solutions that don't have PIN pads on them and still be able to do contact and contactless transactions. Historically, the interchange rates between a debit card that's runs as a credit card versus a debit card is with PIN, it's not that substantially different anymore. So again, I think merchants can take advantage of smaller solutions, don't have keypads, and again, go to more of that touchless experience. Other than tapping your card or tapping your smartphone, you don't have to enter anything into the terminal. So that's available today. And again, even if you have PIN turned on with your solution, usually that's through a software configuration. You can change that and not have to require PIN on the payment device itself.
And Heather, are you seeing that similarly with your ISVs and integrated partners? Or do you see people removing PINs? I mean,
yes, absolutely. I mean, and we're encouraging them to, leverage that, especially in today's day and age where people don't want to touch the device. Turn it off, don't require it. You don't need it.
Yeah. The crazy one outside of PIN, signature.
Yeah.
Signature is not required. But certain market segments, restaurants can be one of them, still do signature.
Yep.
And it's like that's almost where we can help the marketplace and help educate them. It's like it's not required.
Yeah.
But they're just used to it. They're concerned with the chargeback issues. So PIN is something that's out there, but the signature is the one I think it's more interesting because it's like it's not required and they could go away from that tomorrow and not have any material impact to their business.
So then what happens at it feels like there's a whole category of businesses that have become more tip-based as people have been moving more towards like software POS. And you can think of the coffee shop, you go get an espresso and someone pivots the square stand at you, ostensibly to sign, but really it's a tip prompt. But, it seems at least they're not physically just putting a screen and saying, how much do you want to tip me? Because there's nominally going on. I mean, what does that future state of behavior look like from a workflow?
As far as swiveling the device itself?
Well, I'm just saying, as you take signatures out of the equation, I mean, are people just going to get more normalized to seeing a tablet? I mean, I guess nowadays a lot of that commerce isn't happening. You're just not walking into the Starbucks and
right. Yeah. I mean, I think it becomes what is the customer facing piece of that. And, in the Square implementation, they're swiveling. Whereas if you're deploying, a different one of my devices, there's two screens. So there's going to be a consumer facing screen. You're not swiveling the device. The merchant's touching one side, the consumer's touching another. And I think you're going to see people trying to attach stuff to that because they don't want, the merchant has this, either there's a glass there now so they can't, or they have to figure out how to, they don't want to be involved with that consumer touching anything he's touching or she's touching. They want, it to be off behind that glass.
Changing topics here, Tony, a couple questions have come in around other authentication methods. So one was, how would biometrics come into play in the contactless environment? And another one, do we see QR codes for payments being adopted in America? Actually a third one even here. What about face recognition instead of PIN as it is already being used, e.g. in China? Do you see that as a possibility, or we still too far from happening? I mean, I realize those are three different angles of ways of communicating it, but would love to meet through those kind of opportunities or challenges.
Yeah. So QR, I think that's probably the most realistic in the short term, right? Because that's essentially how all of these alternative payment methods work, is through a QR code that either is presented on the merchant's device or infrastructure and scanned by the consumer's phone, or vice versa, shown by the consumer's phone and scanned by a barcode reader of the merchant's. So I think that's immediately, one of the possibilities. The others, biometrics, I think, there's been a lot of talk about cards being issued with, little thumbprint readers and things like that. And I think there've been a few pilots of that approach. I'd love to see more of that, right? Because the card is something that you can, use that as the biometric input as well, instead of having to swipe your thumb or finger on, something that somebody else may have touched 100 times before you, right? So I'd love to see more of that. And then even, you know, a lot more of the consumer mobile devices have facial recognition and thumbprint readers and things like that. I think if we could, you know, find out what the issuers and brands think about maybe rolling out some more capabilities for consumer device CVM style authentications, I think those would be great approaches.
And Mark, I saw you kind of lit up as I was asking the question. What are your thoughts on all this kind of next gen authentication?
Yeah, so I think post-COVID, I think some biometrics, so finger onto a terminal, I'm not sure if that's going to be something people are going to be interested in. Biometrics from a facial perspective is something that we're looking at, and we've actually offered options around cameras for different solutions. I think the challenge there is how far can it be part of the payment chain versus being used for QR code for a loyalty system or program. It goes much higher upstream because, again, in China, you mentioned China, or China was mentioned, it's like using facial recognition as part of that. Well, that's being mandated by the government. So it's the whole ecosystem is supporting it. If only the terminal, the POS is involved with it, but it doesn't go up to the processors, the banks, the card brands, and there's a reduced level of risk or liability or some other benefit there, it's like it probably you won't see fast adoption with it. I think the other variable is really around, are people willing to give up more information? And just it's like perfect example is before everyone got on, I don't like doing a lot of video calls. I don't like to do that. I did this for you, Derek. So.
Thank you, Mark. We appreciate it.
Great. But some people, they don't want their picture taken.
Yeah.
So that's going to happen over time as society opens up. It's like, okay, I'm willing to give certain information there versus other information I may not. So that's going to be a variable to, I think, adoption in the market.
Got it. So here's some information someone wants. I got through the Q&A is what's the status of the Ingenico APOS A8 here in the USA? No, if you can't give up information, that's not.
Oh no, that's fine. So the APOS A8 is something that we've actually have been deploying globally for a number of years. So it's something that we are in process on with releasing here in the U.S. or North America. So it's going to be released in a number of different countries. So I guess whoever you're working with at Ingenico, keep in touch with them, and when we're closer to a launch date we can provide, we'll definitely make sure everyone's aware of it.
Perfect. So one closing question for each of you, and more of a prediction with your respective crystal balls that are all kept 6 feet from each other, obviously. What, kind of the whole theme of, some of the things we talked about earlier in the conversation about smart terminals, in what calendar year do you think shipments of smart terminals will outsell shipments of traditional terminals at your company? So I'll start with you, Heather. So kind of a calendar year for when the cutover is from traditional terminal to smart terminal, right? If ever, but.
I think it's sooner than we want. I think it's very soon. The caveat I would put on that is that at least in the PAX space, a lot of our traditional terminals that are shipping today are still our semi-integrated offerings, our S300 devices. So that's kind of a different, that device is more a glorified pin pad. So it doesn't really fit into the smart terminal. If you're talking pure smart terminals compared to my traditional terminals, I think those are going to outpace us, in 2021. I think by then we're going to be shipping more countertop smart terminals than traditional non-smart terminals.
Tony, how about on the Verifone end? What's your prediction?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Worldwide, I would probably say in the next maybe 3 to 5 years.
Okay. We've still got a few years to run on the traditional stuff. So. I've got a 14-month-old kid. Maybe I'll give him a VX520 when he graduates from high school. So. How about you, Mark? What's the Ingenico prediction?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a few years out, and it really comes back to kind of the first question that came up around the mix between kind of more that countertop standalone versus a full business type of application. The market has to move. The customers have to want to go that path. That's what's going to drive volumes for any of the companies on that front. So I still think it's still a few years out at this point to really see that overall inflection point when you look broadly. Now, there's certain categories or subcategories of products or solutions. They're there today. I mean, I think that's a great thing because, again, offering more of an Android POS-centric solution is not new. This has been shipping in the market for many years already. So I think that's really where it depends how you want to look at it. But I think everything in the market, it's a number of years out. If it's in the SMB space, I think the SMB space will probably be there sooner than, say, a large retailer. Because I think they're willing or able to take advantage of that type of technology maybe more quickly than a large retailer might look at it. So it really just depends how you want to look at the market and different aspects. But generally, I think it's gonna take a while for the whole market to really hit that inflection point.
And not surprising to hear the different segments are different.
Oh yeah.
So excellent. Well, before I hand it over to Janet to wrap this up, I just want to say thank you to Mark from Ingenico, to Heather from PAX, and to Tony from Verifone for joining us today and helping bring each of your three individual perspectives and your company's perspectives here. We've had a lot of good feedback from audience members who went. So thank you to each of the three of you for joining us today.
Thanks for including us.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you very much.